Welcome and good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us tonight for our NVVotes for Kids webinar. I'm Holly Wellborn, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Alliance, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this conversation about the power of voting to shape a better future for Nevada's children and families. CAA's NVVotes for Kids campaign is a statewide, nonpartisan initiative aimed at engaging voters, raising awareness about children's issues, and demonstrating to lawmakers that these issues are top of mind when voters go to the ballot box this election season. NVVotes for Kids reminds us that policies decided by those in office on childcare subsidies, the child tax credit, healthcare access, and child welfare impact not just today's children, but the future of Nevada itself. Voting empowers us to shape these policies and ensure our children's voices are heard at every level of government. Through this campaign, we are working to engage voters before, during, and beyond election cycles to show that children's issues are not partisan issues. They are community priorities. And when we vote, we build the power needed to ensure those priorities are reflected in the policies that lawmakers create. Some quick housekeeping. You will hear a federal election update from our friends at the National Women's Law Center. Then you'll hear from a panel of Nevadans with lived experiences in early childhood, child welfare, and children's health. And finally, you'll get an overview of all the information you need to find your polling location, check your registration, and get out to vote. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end of tonight's program. You can do so at any time via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen or by using the chat. We do encourage the Q&A feature. But please note again, questions will be answered at the end and we'll answer as many as we can. Civil rights leader John Lewis once said, "The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democracy. Every ballot cast is a message to lawmakers that these issues matter, not just to parents, but to everyone who cares about building a stronger, more equitable society. By voting, we not only signal that child welfare, education, and healthcare are priorities, we build the power necessary to demand real investments in these areas. Showing up at the polls ensures that leaders understand the well-being of children is not just a talking point. It is a moral imperative and a mandate for action. Polling data shows that these issues resonate deeply with Nevada voters across the political spectrum. A recent poll conducted on behalf of the First Five Fund by New Bridge Strategies, which is a right-leaning think tank, and Heart Research, which is a left-leaning think tank, found that 90%, that's right, 90% of Nevada voters support federal funding for childcare. 86% of Republicans, 91% of nonpartisans, 92% of Democrats say funding quality childcare programs for children or working parents is essential. Similarly, the University of Maryland's polling reveals that 73% of Nevadans support extending the child tax credit, and 80% support increased funding for universal pre-kindergarten. These findings show that investments in children's programs are not just popular, they are essential. Our elected officials need to know that voters demand policies that support children's well-being and future success. That's why participating in elections is critical. When we show up at the polls, we send a message that health, education, and safety of children are non-negotiable priorities for Nevada's future. I am excited to dive into this conversation tonight. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce Carla Coleman Castillo. Please join us, Carla. Welcome, welcome. Carla is a senior policy analyst at the National Women's Law Center, where she focuses on advancing policies that support equitable access to childcare and early education. With extensive experience in advocacy and public policy, Carla works to ensure that federal investments reflect the needs of working families, particularly those facing systemic barriers. She's led efforts to promote sustainable childcare funding, expand the child tax credit, and protect programs like Head Start. A passionate advocate and working mother, Carla draws from both her professional expertise and personal experiences to inform her work in building a stronger, more inclusive future for all families. She joins us today to provide a federal update and share what is at stake in our federal elections. Carla, thank you so much for joining us. We know it is late on the East Coast, which demonstrates how much this means to you. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Holly. I'm going to share my screen just to have a couple of slides with me as I move through this. But thank you again for the opportunity to be here with you all. It is truly a privilege to get to spend some time with you all. Good evening from Washington, D.C. As Holly mentioned, I am a senior policy analyst. I work on federal child care and early learning policy at the National Women's Law Center. Today, I will be sharing a federal overview with you all from my perspective as a federal advocate working here in D.C. and also as a mom to a 2-year-old. So excited to bring both of those lenses here. I'll start by sharing briefly about the Law Center. We're advocates, experts, and lawyers who fight for gender justice. We take on issues that are central to the lives of women and girls. We do our work through the courts, through public policy, and in society, especially for women facing multiple forms of discrimination. So we use the law in all its forms to change culture, to drive solutions to the gender inequity that shapes our society, and to break down barriers that harm all of us, especially women of color, LGBTQ plus people, and women and families with low incomes. Before I jump into talking about the range of options for federal early childhood education or ECE advocacy based on the possible election results, I'd like to first take a moment to do some context setting about the federal landscape. This is all information that you are likely familiar with, but I'll speak on it for just a few minutes to keep us all on the same page about where we are and to really contextualize what could come next. So each year, millions of low-income children from birth through age 5 benefit from an array of federal early learning and care programs. Many are listed here on this slide. They include the Child Care and Development Block Grant, or CCDBG, the subsidy program for families with low incomes with children under age 13, and also the Head Start program, which provides comprehensive early learning, health, nutrition, and family support services to children birth through 5 and to pregnant people with low incomes. There are other large federal programs that also impact ECE directly, specifically the Individuals with Disabilities Act and the Child and Adult Care Food Program. Just briefly, IDEA provides education and related services for babies, toddlers, and children 3 to 5 with disabilities, and CACFP enables childcare programs to provide healthy and nutritious meals for more than 4 million children and babies each day by reimbursing a portion of the expenses for these meals and snacks. What is important to know about this wide array of programs is specifically for the federal government, the responsibility therein for these programs is to establish the guidelines and to provide their funding. However, despite continued and bipartisan investments, these programs currently serve only a fraction of eligible children. Nationally, only about 1 in 6 children eligible for child care assistance under federal law receive that support. And specifically in Nevada, these programs serve more than 18,000 children and families, but there's only 8% of children birth through age 5 who are eligible for these support systems that are receiving it. As such, we consider our childcare system to be in crisis. It's a system where families don't have enough access to diverse care settings, where early educators are paid poverty-level wages. They're one of the lowest paid professions overall, and especially among low-wage industries. And families with low incomes in rural areas and working non-traditional hours are the most impacted by our historic disinvestment and underinvestment in childcare. Without affordable and widely available childcare, parents, particularly mothers, are forced with missing work, cutting their hours, or leaving the workforce altogether, sacrificing their family's financial stability and their own long-term earnings, which leads to half of all mothers having no retirement savings. What we need for our country and for all our states is more robust and sustained investments at the federal level to ensure wider access and affordability for families and fair pay and work conditions for providers across all settings. What we know from what we've seen over the last few decades is that public investment works. We know that women with young children are able to get to work more when there is additional funding for childcare. We know that working families can make ends meet and work towards their financial stability when they have access to reliable childcare. We know that children thrive when they are in consistent, high-quality settings with a trusted caregiver, and we know that early educators are more likely to stay in their role and the profession when they receive more pay and more access to benefits. So, what does this all mean in the context of the election in a few weeks? It means that we are at a crossroads of opportunity between the system as it is, a system in crisis, short on supply, hemorrhaging educators due to chronic low pay, or the system as we deserve it to be, with robust and sustained funding, increased access, easily affordable, and paying educators justly for their work. The road we take is truly dependent on the outcome of this election for various reasons, and I will quickly highlight four. The first is our opportunity for change through funding and the federal appropriations process. So what is allocated for our programs, our ECE programs, is heavily dependent on what Congress decides to set the funding levels for. Though there was an increase to some ECE programs in FY24, it was only due to a slim majority in the Senate that protected programs that the House wanted to slash funding for or to eliminate entirely. In order to increase the number of children served by these federal programs overall and to reach more than 8% of kids under 5 in Nevada, we must increase funding through these appropriations process, including and relatedly, which is supplemental funding. So for the last 2 years, the Law Center, along with other national partners and state partners, have been working to advocate to the administration and to Congress in order to secure $16 billion in supplemental funding for the childcare sector. This is what was estimated to be needed over the next 5 years for necessary supports and to make up for the lost ARPA funds that have expired over the last 2 years. This present administration supported our asks to Congress, and having a future administration who sees these issues as important and will add them to their budget and future fiscal requests is critical for advancing the support we need through federal funding. The third is the setting of the guidelines for these programs that we discussed. When we have an administration and a Congress that understands the value of our mixed delivery system, we can make progress towards building a more equitable and just ECE landscape. So this would include increasing support for home-based providers, including family, friend, and neighbor providers, expanding eligibility for families, reducing copay amounts, and increasing and facilitating provider payments. And lastly, I want to touch on taxes. Hopefully your eyes haven't glazed over yet, but I want to tell you that this one is key for building the ECE system that we need and that we deserve. Next year, a series of tax cuts from the previous administration will be expiring, and these tax cuts have overwhelmingly benefited wealthy people and mega-rich corporations. National advocates like the Law Center and our partners are gearing up for a huge fight in 2025 related to taxes to ensure that these tax cuts don't continue. And we are tying these to care because we need the mega rich to pay their fair share so that we can use those raised revenues from the taxes that they're going to be paying for things that working class people need and deserve, like childcare. But for us to win this fight, we need people in Congress and in the White House who understand the moral imperative of this and are willing to help us win. So in closing, I will underscore that what's at stake in this election, particularly through our lens, is the opportunity to drive large-scale system-wide change for childcare and early learning that benefits families, that benefits children, and that also supports providers and early educators. And how far we can go towards our vision for childcare is critically dependent on the outcome of this election. Without these robust and sustained investments, this system, which has been recognized as a market failure, will continue to erode. And communities and families like mine, like yours, will continue to pay the price for lack of investment in the system. Programs will continue to shut their doors. Early educators will continue to leave to higher paying fields, and parents will pay more out of pocket if they can find care at all. A worst case scenario would involve proposals like those in Project 2025, which aims to eliminate Head Start entirely. A proposal like this would close 50,000 classrooms, impact 250,000 staff, and leave over 800,000 families without access to critical services and ECE options. And in particular, rural counties would lose large shares of childcare centers if a program like Head Start was eliminated. Currently, Head Start centers make up 45% of the centers in very rural counties. and make up 32% of centers in rural counties. So losing Head Start would flood an already strained childcare system and leave many places without care options at all. So families need more investments in and more expansions of childcare options, not less. So if we vote in elected officials who understand the importance of accessible and affordable childcare for our families and for our communities, we can work towards the vision that we know is possible. We need elected officials who understand that your priorities, our priorities are their priorities, and each vote counts towards this. And it's especially essential in ensuring the next administration and the next Congress are ready to get to work on our issues and make changes that benefit children, families, and early educators. You don't need to hear it from me, but you have an important Senate race, and your votes truly could make the difference we need to have a Congress that's willing and ready to act for working families. And we encourage you to not let your engagement end there. Reach out to your elected officials with your care priorities, with other priorities. You are the experts, you are the constituents, and hearing from you about how important childcare is and that you are watching them to make good decisions on this and other issues is an important part of the electoral process. And we would be more than happy to support your outreach to federal elected officials any way that we can moving forward. With that, thank you once again. It has been a privilege to be here with you all, and I will pass it back to Holly.
Very illuminating, Carla. We appreciate you and the National Women's Law Center for all that you do to support programs like the Children's Advocacy Alliance and making sound recommendations to our legislature and helping us to frame issues when we're talking to our federal delegation and for everything that you are doing to support children and families throughout this country. I know it took a lot of time out of your schedule to be with us tonight, and we appreciate it. And so do the folks who are attending today. Just so everyone knows, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our social media and on our YouTube page. So stay tuned for that. And we'll be sure that we get this word out to as many voters as possible. So with that, when I think about what Carla has just discussed with us, I think about the fact that 15 out of 17 of Nevada's counties are rural counties. I think about what's at stake across our entire state when we enter the election cycle. The issues that Carla discussed and that we will discuss with our incoming panel are those kitchen table issues, those day-to-day issues that impact every voter and every resident in the state of Nevada. And they have become front and center in this electoral campaign. We've heard both candidates for president discuss issues like childcare, family tax credit, how to make living more affordable for American families and Nevada families. We're hearing it in our Senate race. We're hearing it all the way down to local elections. So I would like to turn to our Nevada panel. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Acosta with Act for Kids Nevada. She is also a children's health advocate. Yvonne Elise Williams, family child care provider and advocate. And Aria Barbuti, foster youth advisory board leader and an advocate. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. We really appreciate you for taking the time to be with us this evening. Uh, Hearing from those with lived experience is paramount. Every decision that we make at CAA is based on what we are hearing from the community and what the needs of our community are. And they really shape every policy decision that we move and advance in the Nevada legislature, among county commissions, and before local governments. So when we're thinking about our elections, it is important for us to be granular and to think about how that impacts everyday people. And that's why I'm so excited about this panel today. So let's start with a group question. I would like for each of you to introduce yourselves and your organization you work for and represent. And in one sentence, please share why voting for kids and family-focused policies is important to you. Let's go ahead and start with Yvonne.
Hi, yes. My name is Yvonne Elise Williams. I am a family child care educator. I own a family child care program. I am a founding member of the Family Child Care Association of Nevada, who are a group of passionate, wonderful women who connect to develop professional development, advocacy, and community building opportunities for other child care providers or family child care providers. Voting for kids and family focused policies is important because it is an early investment into our children and who are our foundation and our future, as well as an investment into caregivers that pour into these children, creating a solid structure we would have to pay much more for later.
Absolutely. When Carla was talking, I was, thinking about how those investments, how much those investments from the federal government would mean and how much it would mean for childcare in this state. And that pretty much every problem that we're having with our subsidy system could be resolved if the federal government were to act. And that gets pretty frustrating, but I think it also keeps us quite motivated. So thank you, Yvonne. How about you, Rebecca?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you to Holly and the CAA team for having me. I'm Rebecca Acosta. I'm a board certified patient advocate, and I work with or at A&J Patient Advocacy, supporting children and families in the healthcare space across our state. But tonight I'm coming to you as a volunteer advocate with Act for Kids Nevada, which is a fairly new nonprofit. It's statewide, and we're working to elevate the voices of children and families, specifically in the healthcare space, so that they are present and the number one voice at every table where decisions are being made for their healthcare. And for me, voting and civic engagement in general is just the way we let our elected officials know what is important to us, right? If we don't ask, we shall not receive. So it is super important to me. It's how I hope that my children are seeing as an example. And yes, let's get out the vote.
Absolutely. That's why we're here today. We want to encourage people to get out there and vote. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Maria, tell us about Fate and YAB and all the things you're involved in with foster youth and why you're voting for kids and families this election.
Hi, I'm Aria. I work with a lot of different organizations. I work with you guys, CAA, Children's Advocacy Alliance. I run our YABs, which is our youth advisory boards for Nevada. I work with NFYI. I work at iFoster, all focus groups for foster youth and just child welfare policies. Um, why voting for kids and family focused policies is important to me is because I am that young adult who is directly impacted by these policies. So I do rely on that governmental assistance and that support. So this has everything to do with me.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. Um, and I'm so excited to have you, Aria. And I'm going to throw the panel for a little bit of a loop and go out of order because you're absolutely right. This is your first election. This is the first time that you will be voting. Is that correct?
Yes, this is the first time I will be voting in this election. Super
It's so
excited.
exciting. And I think about you as a leader and how you have led our youth advisory board groups, which I would love for you to talk about in just a moment, and the impact that you've already made. And you haven't even cast a ballot yet. And so I hope you're feeling really empowered and inspired. And I thank you so much for everything that you do for foster youth throughout our state. So just to follow up there, Aria, um, why do you believe it's important for young people, especially those with lived experience in the foster care system, to participate in elections? And how can voting help amplify the voices of youth advocating for change?
So the importance of participating in these elections, especially those with lived experience, is the fact that they have lived experience. So that carries the most weight because we've experienced a system, whether it has failed us or it isn't working. This is the most crucial thing in order to fix this system or improve the system, is voting to change that. And then how that would how voting would amplify those voices with youth who advocate for this change is that they're demanding for it. If there's a population of these youth who've experienced the same thing, the same system that's broken, that's equally like the biggest role that these young voices have is that they've been a part of that broken system and they want to fix it. So yeah.
Absolutely. No more powerful voice than those with lived experience. 100%. Yvonne, um, so on a similar frame, what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a family friend and neighbor child care provider, such as, HOA restrictions, delayed subsidy payments, low wages that are not on par with other educators? And how can voting help bring attention to these issues and encourage leaders to support childcare providers?
Yeah, so low wages mean that I have to struggle, to take care of myself and the children I care for, all while trying to maintain affordable payments for parents, which, providing that consistent quality care is the biggest challenge, especially with delayed subsidy payments. I prepare, for emergencies, and one of the emergencies I would hope not to have is a delayed subsidy payment. And then as far as the HOAs, there are a lot of children, or there's not enough childcare facilities to accommodate the ever-growing children that need the care. So, family childcare programs make it more affordable and accessible. And the HOA restrictions don't allow for us to move forward in that, creating a more diverse and accessible and affordable care.
Yeah. And so many family, friend, and neighbor providers are, building associations like what you belong to, getting out there, building power behind that, and really talking about, that HOA issue. And we'll talk more about what the policy recommendations look like in just a moment. Thank you so much, Yvonne. Rebecca, let's talk a little bit about children's health. Um, we'll talk about the hospital in a moment. You and I were at a phenomenal event today.
We were.
Um, and a really inspiring event that I think really snuck up on us in regards to Comprehensive Children's Hospital, but I'll let you talk about those experiences. But from your perspective as a parent and advocate, what role do elections play in shaping the healthcare landscape? And in addition to that, how can voting ensure that issues like mental health services, prenatal care, and addressing provider shortages remain priorities for future policymakers?
This is a great question, Holly. I'm so glad this was on our list of things to consider. We live in a country and a society where everything is political, whether we love that or not, especially the systems in which we live and work, right? So education, healthcare, childcare, everything that we're talking about tonight is a function of a system. And unfortunately, healthcare is no different. It is politically driven and motivated, just like most other systems. So for families, whether they have children or not, sometimes I'm speaking with grandparents to try to have them get more invested in their grandchildren's generation and what's happening for them. This is how voting is how we let them, like I said before, legislators know what is important to us, but it also is a way for us to show them, like, not only is it important, this is a must have, right? We cannot not invest in our future, which are our children. Um, it's just a no-brainer to me. Like, I don't know a lot of other beautiful flowery language to put behind it when people ask, like, this is our civic duty. I think it's our moral duty as a society to take care of our most vulnerable, which are our children. And what was the second part of the question again?
Um, I mean, I think that really got to the
Okay.
heart of it, but you know, how can voting ensure that issues like mental health services, prenatal care all of those children's health issues
Yeah.
remain priorities for future
Yeah.
policymakers.
Absolutely. In the last couple legislative sessions in Nevada, big strides have been made because of advocates and because of people coming together with a unified voice saying, we want this. So, extending the Medicaid to 12 months after a child's birth, um, the behavioral health funding that Governor Lombardo recently assigned specifically to pediatric behavioral health. These things would not happen if advocates and community members did not come together, unite their voices, and say, we need this now.
Yeah, we are voting members of the public. These are
Yes.
the issues that we care about. Children's health is crucial and essential.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So, Yvonne, if you want to come on back, next question for you. Why is it essential for voters to prioritize childcare and early learning when they cast their ballots this election season? And what impact could better policies have on both providers and families who depend on home-based care?
Yeah, so usually it unfortunately takes like a crisis for people to realize what's essential. And our most recent crisis was the pandemic, which really shed a huge light on childcare. A lot of facilities, weren't available for care. A part of it was a lack of support and supplies, which is, could have been prevented with proper funding. And a lot of that uh, had parents looking for alternative care. And that alternative care were family child care providers. So, you know, we need to continue to put our funding into childcare and family childcare providers. So it's essential for voters to prioritize early learning and children when they go to the ballot, because it's essential for our country's workforce. When people were trying to decide, if they could continue to afford care or if they, could just keep their kids at home, um, that was inconvenient for the workers at that time. And families need and deserve to be able to have the option to have a diverse need for care and quality, better policy support, affordable, accessible, quality childcare for all families.
Yeah, absolutely. And this coming election, or excuse me, this coming legislative session, and something that we're talking about at CAA, we're grateful to Assemblywoman Natha Anderson, who is sponsoring legislation that will restrict, not completely prohibit, but restrict a homeowners association's ability to prevent home-based childcare services. It's a huge barrier. And by opening up doors for providers like you, we can make that change. And we know that your association has been very active in moving that forward and helping us define what that needs to look like. So we're looking forward to those changes, looking forward to, increasing our subsidy and fixing all of the problems in the system that are delaying subsidy payments getting to childcare providers. So we know that your day to day is incredibly hard and that what you're doing is a public service. So thank you so much, Yvonne. Arya, what about you? Just kind of talking about policy. What are some policy changes that would make the biggest difference for foster youth? And how can voters ensure that these issues remain a priority for future policymakers?
I think some policy changes would be the increasing of stipends for transitional age youth. So, although we have that government assistance, it doesn't go up with inflation. So, in this day and age, although we have that assistance, is it as helpful as it is with the amount that is given right now the with how costly things are? And also access to affordable housing or education. Like this is a population that is myself and a ton of others who should have the opportunity to these resources and to this assistance as anyone else would, and is especially needed for this population because we're dependent on that. Like I say in some of these sessions that like the government is sort of like a parent in a sense. So we should have every right to all of those opportunities as well, because we're dependent on it. And how voters can ensure that these issues remain a priority is by of course, voting for these issues and being out there and amplifying that voice of this is an issue, because there's a ton of issues and there's a ton of policy changes out there, but if it's in the back of their radar for these policymakers, there's not going to be movement in this change. So we have to constantly like put out a reminder of like this is an issue, and this is a demand versus just an ask, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think through Aria is a leader on our youth advisory boards for Clark County and statewide. And I think that vehicle for change, I think a lot of the times our policymakers overlook what you have to say, that they get very stuck in the obstacle. And I think that's across issues. That's healthcare, that's early childhood education, that's child welfare. They get stuck in the obstacle instead of stuck in the solution when they know that the better outcomes for children overall are to invest in these things up front. And so that's why we're here. We need to get really loud about these issues. We have to show that people care about these issues when they are going to the ballot box this election cycle. Rebecca, now we get to talk about the hospital. Um, so tell us, so today we went to this beautiful ceremony here in Las Vegas. I flew down to be a part of it. We were with our parent ambassadors and our Act for Kids advocates who had graduated from our parent ambassador program, to announce the upcoming that the comprehensive children's hospital that you and others have been advocating for will be breaking ground. There's still a lot of work to do, but I would love for everyone to know and understand, connecting that, voters care about these issues. I'd like them to know and understand how coalition building and advocacy efforts influenced the creation of the Children's Hospital and why it's important for voters to elect leaders who value community-driven healthcare solutions.
100%. A quote that I like to share, that I got from a colleague years ago, is that if you think a tiny, small one person can't make a difference, spend the night in a tent with a mosquito. Um, that's kind of how Act for Kids
Yeah.
came about and worked out for we're just coming up on our year anniversary. So we are a new organization, but we were formed by parents, advocates, and healthcare professionals who all have children across the state of Nevada and have access to healthcare for our children. So some of us do this as a living, but all of us have that personal experience. And we found each other pretty organically. I actually met one of the board members on Instagram several years ago, because her Instagram handle was Children's Hospital Nevada. We need a Children's Hospital for Nevada, or something to that effect. And I was like, oh, I found my person. And we've kept in touch. And then others joined the cause along the way. And then last December, we said, hey, the 8 of us are together wanting the same thing, doing smaller efforts alone in our individual professional and personal spaces. We need to come together because people aren't listening to us as families across the state. They're just hearing one single story from each of us. Like, we need to be the force that drives the voices of patients and families. Like, they're left out of this giant healthcare conversation for children, and they're the experts, right? Kids and their caregivers and loved ones, they know what they need from a doctor's appointment, from a hospital system. They know that they need to have a pediatric phlebotomy blood drawing station in our state, in Southern Nevada especially. but they have largely been left out of all these decision making and planning questions and tables where all these decisions are being made. So that is kind of how Act for Kids came about, and we really hit the ground running. We came together as the 8 of us and said, where is your expertise? Where are your connections, whether they're professional or personal? And let's make a list and start going out into the community, telling people who we are, why we're together, and what we want to accomplish. And let's bring everybody on board, right? And to our delight, we were welcomed by so many community organizations, including Children's Advocacy Alliance, across Nevada, just saying, yes, we need to hear from families. Like, where have you been for the last 25 years? And that is truly how we came together. And we have sat down with the Nevada Legislative Interim Joint Interim, Health and Human Services Committee, the chair, their researchers. We have sat with Las Vegas Councilman Knudsen, who's the mayor pro tem of Las Vegas. It has been absolutely mind-blowing, the avenues that have opened up to us when we have come together to represent children and families and say, this is what our community needs. This is how we would like it to happen. What can you do to help us get one step further on that journey? I work with kids. And so when they ask me, what does advocacy mean? I say, like, I'm an advocate. I make friends and I share stories. And for kids, that's a great explanation. But for adults, it really comes down to relationship building, community building, bringing everyone together for a common cause and go forth, charge the mountain. And it has worked wonderfully. And today was a perfect example of how our voices have gotten increasingly louder over that last year, and that they've also been heard. So super exciting. Our work is far from over, but we are thrilled to continue a collaborative partnership with both the System Building Hospital and anyone else who is in Nevada that's willing to push comprehensive healthcare forward for our kids.
Congratulations. It was absolutely, I have chills. It makes me choke up a little bit. But it was incredible to be there, and we're so happy that we could support you and Act for Kids on that journey. And it's not over. We will be very vocal in the legislative session to ensure that the resources are there to make this a reality. It's just the beginning, but it is an effort that happened because of you and parents like you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Yvonne, talking about policies, we heard a little bit about, Children's Hospital, something that our parent advocates have been fighting for. And what are you fighting for? What are some of the policy changes that would make the biggest difference for childcare providers in Nevada? And how can voters use their voice to advocate for those changes through the electoral process?
Yeah, one of the biggest changes I would like to see is having an office for early childhood education that is recognized by our governor. It includes increased funding that is reserved indefinitely for early childhood education. Voters could use their vote as their voice by giving attention to representatives that support policies that ensure strong and stable funding for family child care programs, provide support for fair compensation and benefits for family child care educators, and develop equitable policies that remove barriers and recognize the value in empowering the unique contributions that family child care providers provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing about the office. That's something we've been talking about for a long time. And it really is a crucial step as Nevada moves, hopefully moves toward a universal pre-K system. Having a strong childcare system is going to be essential for that. Having a strong early childhood health system, all of those different programs that encompass the early childhood system, they've been very fragmented. And that office can really bring that together. In the future, we'll be having a series of different webinars like this one, where folks can come out and hear those ideas on different policy issues. And that will be one that we host in the coming weeks. So we'd love to have you back, Yvonne. Aria, back to you. In your experience working with youth advisory boards, what message would you give to young people about the power of their vote? And how can voting be a tool to show leaders that youth, especially those in the foster care system, care about the issues that impact their lives?
So my experience with working with the youth advisory boards is that I get to see those with similar lived experience have the same issues as I have. So there is power with those voices, and we're especially seeing that with our youth advisory boards because those are the youth who are currently in that system or have made it out. And a message that I would give to young people about the power of their vote is that um, uh, what was amplified in the other questions was your vote is your voice, and the power is through your voice and vote to change what is the issue. And especially with youth who've experienced the foster care system, my vote is especially important because I am the power to my vote or to my voice because I've been through the system. I made it out. And I'm voting for those who are still in the system because they're the ones who are most impacted. So the the most power to your vote is that you're voting for the future. So this is for our future. And it has everything to do with everyone because it's our future. So um, voting can be that tool, especially those who have been in the foster care system because these issues impact them. Like they're still impacting me as a young adult. I'm transitioning into adulthood. There are youth who um, are getting that government assistance and there's age limits and nobody is ready for the world yet when the cutoff is 18 or 21. So this has um, every like your voice has every right to these issues because you've lived through them. So that's what's most important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that sort of sums up where I wanted us to leave off. So Yvonne and Rebecca, similar question for you to close us out. Um, what is one key message you want attendees to leave with about the power of their vote in shaping policies that impact children and families? And how can voters continue to advocate for these issues beyond Election Day? So let's start with you, Rebecca.
That's a great question. I always say, or like to use I'm a quotes girl, apparently. Perfect can't be the enemy of good. And so many times when we're talking about children's policy across any system, but really a lot in children's healthcare, if it's not exactly what everybody wants, then we're not doing anything. And that's largely what's happened in the last several decades in our state. And here we are with so many challenges on so many fronts. So when you vote, when anyone votes, you are voting not just for right now, but you're voting for your neighbor's kid who's not born yet. You're voting for your own grandchildren, maybe. It has impacts for generations. So it's not a quick fix and it's not a 5-second TikTok reel like we have become so accustomed to, but it's really one of those things where you're putting away for retirement, for example, you're putting away for our next generation of kids, their health and well-being. And I can't think of anything more important than that.
Absolutely. Yvonne, what are your thoughts?
I Rebecca stole all of my thoughts. I agree. I agree that it, again, just voting for family childcare, voting for children, voting for early learning, it's all the foundation of what our future is going to look like. And again, it's an investment, and our vote is an investment into our future generations. And so, again, I could not have said it better than Rebecca. I 100% agree. Voting for family childcare, family policies now is going to determine what we have for our future.
Well said by all of you. Such powerful leaders. We are so lucky. Aria, I am so excited that you were going to vote in your first election. Um, I'm so excited that we're all going to work with each one of you in the upcoming legislative session. Thank you so much for helping to really paint the picture of how all of these systems worked together and in conjunction together, and why the power of the ballot box is the power of policy and elevating the voices of those with lived experiences. So thank each and every one of you. So now we've heard about, how all of these things are connected. We have heard about potential policy priorities for the future. So how do you vote? Maybe you haven't yet. Early voting has started. What is the road ahead after the election? So I am very pleased to introduce Jake Matthews, CAA's Government Affairs Manager. This upcoming session this is, of course, Jake's first election cycle with us, and this upcoming session will be his first legislative session with us, but he has been hard at work administering our NVVotes for Kids campaign along with our marketing director, Chip. So I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to tell you everything you need to know about this election cycle and what's to come, and I'll return for some Q&A. Thank you, everybody. Take it away, Jake.
All right. Thank you, Holly. And thank you to all of our speakers. That was wonderful. My name is Jake Matthews, and I'm the Government Affairs Manager here with Children's Advocacy Alliance. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on the importance of voting and how you can ensure that your voice is heard in this election and as we go forward into the legislative session. This isn't just about making a choice. It's about building power, shaping the future for Nevada, for the children of Nevada, and ensuring that the issues that we discussed today are prioritized by our elected officials. These critical issues are at the heart of policy discussions in Nevada, but these decisions aren't made in isolation. They are influenced by who we elect to represent us. And that is where your vote comes in. This year, there are several key issues on the ballot that affect Nevada's children, and it is critical that each of us shows up at the polls to advocate for them. Voting isn't just a right, it is a responsibility for the next generation. Voting allows you to have a say in who shapes the laws and policies that directly impact our communities, whether that is expanding access to quality childcare, addressing whole healthcare needs for children, or improving the outcomes for those in the child welfare system. Your vote can make a difference. When we vote, we're not just participating in a process, we are actively shaping the community our children will grow up in. So let's talk a little logistics, because being prepared is key to making sure your voice is heard. So here's a few things that you need to know to make voting as smooth as possible this year. So number one, voter registration. If you're not registered to vote yet, or you need to update your registration, it is not too late. You can register online or check your registration status all the way up to Election Day by going to nvvotesforkids.org. Also, Nevada allows for same-day voter registration at polling places during early voting and on Election Day. So it is definitely not too late if you need to check your registration or update it. Number two, finding your polling location. So make sure you know where to vote and make a plan to do so. You can find your polling location again easily by going to nvvotesforkids.org and clicking on the Where to Vote button. There you will find a map of all the polling locations and ballot drop-off locations, both for early vote and Election Day, in the whole state and the hours that they're open. So it's very user-friendly, and make sure you're not scrambling to find a polling location at the last minute. Number three, decide if you're voting by mail, voting early, or voting on Election Day. In Nevada, we've made it incredibly easy and convenient to vote. You can mail in your ballot as long as it's postmarked by November 5th, Election Day, or drop it off at any ballot drop box. You can also vote early in person from now through November 1st, giving you ample time to vote at your convenience and avoid lines. Or, of course, you can vote on Election Day in person on November 5th. And number four, filling out your ballot. So whether you vote in person or by mail, it's really important to follow the instructions closely when filling out your ballot. Make sure you mark your choices clearly and sign in the appropriate spot if you're using a mail-in ballot. If you aren't sure how to vote in the legislative races, you can use the Find Your Candidate tool on NVVotesforKids.org to see where the legislative candidates in your district stand on the issues that matter to you the most, and you can also contact them directly. Lastly, when we show up to the polls, we send a message that we care about what happens to the children of Nevada. We're saying that issues like childcare, healthcare access, and child welfare aren't just talking points, they are priorities. And the more of us that vote, the stronger that message becomes. So by signing our pledge at, again, NVVotesforKids.org, you're committing to be a voice for the children who can't advocate for themselves. You're stepping up to protect their future and hold our leaders accountable. Our vote is the most direct way to make sure that kids' issues are front and center during the next legislative session. So as we move beyond this election and closer to the legislative session, there will be even more opportunities for you to get involved. Voting is just the beginning of this. Once the elections are over, we need to make sure we're staying engaged with the legislative process and advocate for policies that prioritize Nevada's children. Be sure to stay tuned for upcoming events and advocacy trainings and other ways to make your voices heard during the session. And remember, when we vote, we're not just participating in a process, we are shaping a future where every child in Nevada can thrive. So thank you for your commitment to voting and for being a champion for Nevada's kids. And now I will hand it back over for the Q&A.
That mute button. Thank you, Jake. That was excellent. Now everybody has what they need. That website is NV, as in abbreviation for Nevada, NVVotes, the number 4 kids.org. That's where you can find all the information that Jake just shared with you, where you can find the pledge form as well. Please take that pledge. That also shows power in numbers. And now we will open up the Q&A if any folks have questions. Going once, going twice. I think the message is it is 6:30 on a Tuesday and even later than that for folks on the East Coast. So if you do have any follow-up questions, please reach out. Please reach out to us, info@caaNV.org, cat@applenv.org, and we can get those questions answered for you. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. I want to thank our panelists and our speakers once again. Thank you and good night. Please get out and vote and show your power at the ballot box. Thank you.